of Clarion Connection. Good morning, Ron.
Morning, Steve. How are you doing?
Oh, it's another day in paradise.
Today on Clarion Connection, we're going to talk about oil.
Like
Texas tea.
Black gold Texas tea.
Yep, Jed Clampert. And you know where it all started?
Oh, yeah.
Pit Hole.
Pit Hole.
Pit Hole near here in Venango County. And today we're talking with Paul Adamides, an author. He's written quite a few books on the oil boom days, and we're going to talk about those books. And he also has a book, reimagining the great stories of the early days of Pennsylvania oil. Paul, welcome to Clarion Connection.
Thanks so much for having me, Ron. It's great to be here.
Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about your new book? Or?
Sure. Well, actually, the way the book came about was several years ago, the Oil Regional Alliance and some other partners wanted to do a book to commemorate Colonel Drake's 150th anniversary of drilling that well in Titusville that started the whole adventure going. And I was in the competition. I won it. I wrote the book, and I just couldn't stop. Every time I talk to someone, they tell me that their great-great-grandfather used to drive a nitro wagon, or owned an oil field, or sold out to the wrong person. I mean, there were just all kinds of stories, and so it kept coming back. There's more and more and more to learn, and the era is really well documented anyway. There are like 5 books written about the oil business between 1859, when Drake hit, and 1865. I mean, it happened real fast, and they were well documented. So I got lots to read, people to talk to. Every place I go talk to the Rotarians, and people tell me about their great-great-grandfathers. There's so much more information. I decided to take a little different tack, since some of these stories are pretty well known anymore, and treat them a little differently. Less like history and more like stories you tell around a campfire. And in matter of fact, one of the stories is actually a ghost story, set in both 1865 and in the current day. So we wanted to liven up the stories that we've heard, and so I kind of did some twisting and turning. It's not literally history, but it seems to be a lot more fun than history, I would think.
Can you tell us a little bit about the ghost story, or do they have to buy the book?
Well, I'm not going to give anything away about the ghost story.
Okay.
I will tell you this. I had so much fun writing it, and there are so few ghost stories about this region for some reason. The oil didn't seem to bleed to ghosts. Civil War battlefields, of course, led to ghosts. Prisons led to ghosts. Almost any cemetery had ghosts, but not oil. So I had so much fun writing that I'm going to write a whole book of just ghost stories about Pennsylvania oil, the early days. We're talking about 1859 to 1898 or so. Because 1901, of course, the oil all moved to Texas, and that was pretty much the end of the oil here.
Why did it move to Texas?
It was a town called Spindletop. A big gusher in Pennsylvania oil would be 1,000 barrels a day. At Spindletop, it was 1,000 barrels an hour in some places. It was a huge, huge find, and the whole industry basically headed that way. The other thing that happened too was, whereas Pennsylvania crude is very high in paraffin and low in asphaltenes, it is very good for lubrication. The opposite is true for Texas oil, but that's okay because they use theirs for gasoline. There was no need for gasoline when Colonel Drake struck a well here. Oil was used for lighting and for lubrication, and for medicine in some cases as well. So the gasoline thing happened in Texas. All this easy, they call it Pennsylvania. They call it Texas crud as opposed to Pennsylvania crude, because it's not very good oil, but it's great for making gasoline. Turn of the century, gasoline takes over as the dominant fuel in the country, and we're still there now.
Does that explain why Quaker State for years was in the Venango County because of lubrication?
Exactly right. Exactly right. All the big ones. Pennzoil was here. Quaker State was here. The other ones came from there. I have a whole list of that in the first book. But that's where it all started, because of the quality of the lubrication of the oil.
But it was pretty dramatic at that time. I was one of the persons who heard you at a Rotary meeting, and you were talking about Pit Hole and the dramatic change when oil was discovered. It was phenomenal.
Well, when Colonel Drake started to drill for oil in Titusville in late 1858, people said he was crazy. They called it Drake's folly. 2 things were said. Number one, how's he going to find it? You don't have to dig for oil. It just shows up on the water. And 2, what are you going to do with it when you get it? Within several days after his strike, everyone was saying, he's a genius. We're all going to be rich on this. And so, yeah, it changed incredibly quickly. Pithole, for example, didn't exist in March of 1865. By December of 1865, they had 20,000 people there, which made it about the third largest city in the state at that time. And it happened so fast that the houses were built, everything was built right there, because transportation was difficult. You couldn't live in the suburbs and drive to work. There was no way to get there. You wanted to live right where you were going to work. So if you were working in the oil fields, you lived right by the oil fields. And so everything was very compact, and you'd be drilling next door and sleeping 10 feet away. And so, but it was happened so fast that nothing was made of brick or stone. Everything was wood. Bang, bang, get it up. They built a hotel in one day. And it happened just incredibly fast. And then because of the amount of drilling and the amount of fires, it went away almost as fast. It had a population of 20,000 in 1865. By 1867, it had a population of 238. Because people said, why should I stick around? There's no more oil in the ground. And everything's burning down. As I said, Pithole both dried up and burnt down.
So, yeah, people don't think about the burning aspect. And did it burn a lot, too, because of the wood and then the oil?
Well, the fact is, let's say the environmental considerations weren't as advanced as we are today when it comes to such things. Oil was everywhere.
Right.
It was easy to get the oil. Oil came out of the ground. For a long time, well, in Pithole, for example, oil was much cheaper than water. And whiskey was even cheaper, because what you had to do to get it was so easy. Barrels, the oil barrel cost more than the oil, because you had to make a barrel. That required some labor and some discipline and some things. Oil just came out of the ground.
Well, transportation, getting it to places then too would be amazing.
It was incredibly hard, because all they really had at that time, I'm talking about at the very beginning,
right,
before there was a railroad to Oil City, before there was a railroad to Pithole, was wagons. Guys driving wagons with horses or oxen with barrels of oil. You could carry about 8 barrels of oil, which is about 3 tons worth of oil. But the roads were nothing, too. The roads were muddy. The roads were soaked with oil as well. So getting the stuff from the well to the refinery or to the railroad was quite a chore. But then pipelines spring up, and the railroad is extended from Corey down to Titusville and then onto Oil City, and the job of Teamster just goes away because the transportation replaced all that. There's also a thing in the book about pond freshets. Pond freshet is a way of moving oil on the water. They would line up the boats, stack them up with barrels all the way up Oil Creek, and then they would open up these dams that had been set there for lumbering, open them up one by one coming down the creek, and all these guys would roar down the creek at one time, trying to get to the Allegheny River to head on down to Pittsburgh and get the oil refined. And of course, it was a major disaster almost every time. I mean, you have boats, as big as your dining room table, and boats that are 60 feet long, running into each other and spreading oil all over the place. Several families made their fortunes by waiting at the end of Oil Creek and scooping up the oil that was left on the water from all that had been broken up when the boats wrecked into each other. So that was another short-lived adventure. But again, it's the kind of thing that didn't happen anywhere else. And this was they called it the excitement, and they meant it. I mean, it really was. It changed the world, and it was happened. You can go look at see that junction of Oil Creek and the Allegheny right now. Every time I drive past it, I say, that's where all that happened. And when they had a pond freshet, the people would dress up like they were going to a Super Bowl party, and they'd come down to watch it, and they'd cheer for their favorite boats. I mean, it was an event. It was like the Super Bowl combined with the Oscar night. People would get together and celebrate, and that was the big adventure.
The good thing there weren't any speeches.
Well, exactly right. No speeches and no red carpets.
No red carpets.
A lot of smelly oil for sure.
Now, this is your latest book, Oil Fields and Oil People. But how many books have you done on the oil?
This is only the second.
It's the second.
This is the second one. Yeah, the third one is going to be an anthology of the best writing of the period, and today's historians as well. It's called The Troubadours of Early Pennsylvania Oil, and I'm working on that one right now. After that, I'd like to do a book on the boom towns, because that's just great. You know, Pithole is just one, although it was the loudest, and noisiest, and the smelliest, and the funniest. But many boom towns are still around, of course. Oil City, Franklin, Titusville, Pleasantville are still around. Butler had several, Butler County. But the fun of it was that the boom towns would be another good book. And then, as I said, I want to do a book of ghost stories set in the region as well. There's just too many good things. You know, when a writer comes across a mine like this of all these wonderful stories and wonderful characters, you can't stop. I mean, it's like the biggest buffet dinner you ever went to. You know?
I always thought it was interesting. The crusading journalist at that time was in Venango County, I believe.
Oh, sure. Well, every kind of journalist was here. There's a whole chapter in one of the books which is called the Literary Guild, about all the great writers who were around at the time. Mark Twain came around. I mean, there was everybody had something to do with it. But the most famous, of course, was Ida Tarbell, whose father built their house in Titusville from the wood he bought from an abandoned hotel in Pithole. And that house is still there, as a matter of fact, and some of the same fittings were still from the Pithole Hotel. And of course, she wrote the muckraking adventure, which basically blew up Standard Oil, exposing the techniques that they were using to not just capture the market, but own the market completely.
What were some of those techniques?
Oh, you know, forcing out pipelines. You know, they were known for putting their own henchmen on to. If you were trying to build a pipeline through there, they would stop you from covering their ground. So you try to go around and they'd knock down a mountain so you couldn't get through. I mean, there was some very, very tough. Plus, making deals with the railroads so the railroads would give them more, charge them less for their movement of oil, and charge the other guys an extra payment for moving their oil. So it was lots of stuff like that was going on. And then eventually they did own the market. They were the trust.
Now, if anybody wants to read this book, how could they obtain it?
Oh, my book?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. It's 3 places here in Clarion County, as a matter of fact. The Book Nook right there on Main Street. The Clarion County Historical Society carries it as well, and so does the Fulmer House. They have a nice collection of local Pennsylvania history and the Pennsylvania authored books. So they all have it. You can also go to my Facebook page. That's Adam, as in the first man, Midas, as in the Golden Touch Press, Adam Midas Press, and at Facebook, and you can see there are pictures from the book, there are articles from the book, there's stories about other things I've learned since then. So that's a way of getting to know me. You can order right from there, or with PayPal, or you can print out the order form, sign it, send it to me, and we'll take care of it for sure.
So one way or another, they can get a copy of this book. It is a nice, handy size, and lots of pictures.
It was meant to be handy is exactly the right word. Handy to hold, handy to read, easy to enjoy. And if you have a friend or a family member who's a history buff, it'd be a great Christmas present for them. It's not demanding. It's not work to read. I always say it's a great bathroom read, for heaven's sakes. It's fun.
Oh, great. What's the most rewarding part of writing?
Well, writing itself is hard work. I don't love writing. I love meeting the people afterwards and getting on radio shows and getting to talk about what I did. You ever notice how those sports writers, they spend a lot more time on talking on the radio than they do writing, because it's a lot easier to write a lot easier to talk than it is to write.
Well, okay, it's 164 pages, lots of white space, but how long did it take for you to write this?
I would guess about 1.5 years, basically. There were decisions that had to be made based upon what I'd done before, in terms of how much do I include from like what I did in the first book, and how much. The first book was really a picture book, and there wasn't really that much verbiage at all. But this one we wanted to be, as we said, keep it looking good, but not to make it too hard to read or too heavy on people.
And where did you get all the photos from the book? Just local sources?
No, the Drake Well Museum is the depository of visuals on the oil adventure. They have almost a complete collection of John Mather, who was one of the most famous photographers of the time, and like 1,100 glass negatives. They still have them there, And so they, terrific stuff. They're great people to work with, and they sell my book too. If you're ever in Titusville, you can go stop in their bookshop and check it out.
I think Venango campus has some special library collection too.
Yes, that's the, oh boy, it's the, jeez, I can't remember, it's the sewer library, but I can't remember the name of the collection. They have a very good collection of oil research books. So does the Oil City Library, as a matter of fact. They have a very good collection. But for visuals, you want to go to Drake Well, those are the folks that have it all.
Well, thanks, Paul. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be back in a few minutes to talk more about the oil industry and Paul's other careers, including working with Rush Limbaugh.
He gave away the punchline.
Welcome back to Clarion Connection. I'm Ron Wilshire, and my guest today is Paul Adamides, a local author. He has a new book out, Oil Fields and Oil People. Before the break, we were talking about the discovery of oil in Pit Hole and all the ramifications thereof. And I was wondering if you see any parallels today with the tremendous interest in Marcellus shale.
The Marcellus Shale is the biggest thing that's happened to this area in terms of energy since the oil boom in the 1850s and 60s. But it's a different world, a more complicated world. I mean, no one cared about what happened with the oil. If it spilled all over everything, it was no big deal. If you lost some, so what? As a matter of fact, when they first refined the oil back in the 1860s, everything that they came out of the refining process was usable except for one, gasoline, which they threw in the river. It was useless. They had no use for it. And so the environmental considerations make a big difference. So there was no one around saying this is going to ruin our water. There was no one around saying this is going to ruin our land. No one around saying this is going to kill off all the deer. I mean, that was not the case then. Whereas now the people who have concerns, some are genuine, some seem to me to be a little fabricated, a little scared. But the potential impact is big. But the oil boom in the 1860s changed everyone's life. It changed the lives of the ministers and the printers, and everyone was able to speculate in oil. You could buy a part of a well for as little as $10 or $20 and get your share in, or you could invest in oil speculation, oil stocks, certificates they called them at the time. And so there was everyone was affected by it. I've seen some Marcellus drilling around here, but not enough to notice that it's changing anything, although apparently economically it is changing things. So the difference is probably not a difference in terms of scale, but a difference in terms of speed of impact, how quickly things happen then, as opposed to now where it takes a while. It takes you several months to get a platform built and the drilling to be done. So then it was done overnight, basically.
A lot of technology required today, whereas before it was pretty much dig down in it.
Well, it's funny because the very first wells were actually what they called kicked down. They had a spring pole with a drill bit on one end and two sets of harnesses where you would put your foot in and kick it. Two guys would do that all day. They could sometimes get down as much as 10 feet a day. The oil was 1,000 feet down. And they were going 10 feet a day with their leg power. That was all they had. And some of the first wells were drilled with leg power. So now what happened then usually is we got down far enough, you could tell how the drill was reacting with what was down there. You'd then go buy or rent an engine to drill it down for you. But the first wells were actually kicked down. Human power was what drilled those wells.
So that's a big difference.
Oh yeah, sure.
Now, in addition to your two books on the oil and the many planned, you've done a number of books on baseball.
Yeah, somewhere between 11 and 12, depending on how you count.
Okay.
Yeah, baseball history.
You're into overtime now.
Baseball history. I'm not a how-to guy. I'm not a coach. But I did a book called The Golden Age of Baseball, which was baseball from 1920 when Babe Ruth reached New York until 1978, the last great Yankees team before the current incarnation. And I did a book called The Sluggers, which is, remember in 1998 everyone was talking about hitting home runs. I did a book on the biographies of the top 30 home run hitters of all time. I did a book called The Best of Baseball, which was the best managers, the best games, the best World Series, the best second baseman, the best 10 best of everything, which was a lot of fun too.
You were talking earlier before the show about your varied experience with media, and you were talking about you worked at KQV.
KQV in Pittsburgh. I wrote what they called continuity. Continuity is basically when you don't trust the DJs to say anything, you have to tell them what to say. And that means, continuity means between the records, what the DJs would say. And it was mostly jokes, patter, that kind of thing.
So they'd have to read.
Right, exactly. They didn't trust DJs. You know, as cute as they were at the book signings and the autograph shows, they didn't trust DJs to say anything that made any sense. So they had to hire people like me to write for the DJs. And one of the DJs on KQV was the nighttime guy, 9 to 12, was Jeff Christie was his name. And he was a large fellow with a nice voice. And no one seemed to like him too much, but he was okay. And turns out that Jeff Christie was his stage name. His real name was Rush Limbaugh. And Rush, I used to write for Rush Limbaugh, which means I'm probably the last person in the world who put words in Rush Limbaugh's mouth.
Did you start this whole thing with Rush? Did you put the same words in his mouth that he's uses today?
Oh, no. I was jokes about the Beatles was what I was writing at the time.
Oh, okay.
It was just to fill the gaps between the records, basically.
Any other interesting media experiences?
Well, I was just saying when I was writing advertising for the advertising agencies in Pittsburgh, I always loved doing radio. It was the theater of the mind, theater of the imagination was really the case. I always felt that way. I remember being a kid. We had the first TV on our block, but I would go back into the back room, turn on the big radio, listen to X-1 when I was a kid growing up. I just always loved the radio stuff. And when I was in advertising, the other writers all wanted to do TV commercials. They wanted to do TV stars. But to do a TV commercial, you have to realize could involve 50, 60, or 100 people with all the crew and all the timing and all the lighting and the planning and the casting. I would get together with a good engineer and a box full of sound effects and a good voice talent, and we'd create a new world in a matter of 60 seconds. That was fun for the radio. That was fun.
I think with radio and writing in general for books, that you're calling on the reader or listener to add something to the final product, a little bit of their imagination, whereas TV, usually everything's drawn out for you.
Yeah, well, that's the Buckminster Fuller premise that one medium is hot, one medium is cold, and the cool medium is one where you have to get involved yourself you have to bring something to it. Of course, that's radio. Whereas the hot medium it's all right there. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, was that Marshall McLuhan?
Marshall McLuhan. Did I say Buckminster Fuller? Yeah, Marshall McLuhan. Of course, you're right.
But the medium is the message, and I think that still kind of holds true. Where even like YouTube or something gives a different type of message than any other medium.
Well, the new media are changing things for sure. It's just that they happen so fast, so you don't get a chance to sort them out and figure out if they're changing for the better or for the worse. But I still listen to old-time radio on Sirius XM. They have a station which is nothing but old-time radio plays. I used to write radio plays. We used to, in Franklin, 3 times a year we had an old-time radio night where we would present the plays live just as if they had been, if you were in a radio studio in the 1940s or 50s. And I used to write plays that were kind of parodies of the old-time radio stuff. We'd do X-1, and we'd do Suspense, we'd do Escape, and for McGee and Molly and the Bickersons, and we'd transcribe the scripts. We even did War of the Worlds one year. We actually got permission from the family of the authors to recreate the War of the Worlds using the original script as recorded, as it was done live that night in 1938. And at the very end, we had a cameo by Orson Welles. We played his voice from that recording. And I said, that guy's really good. I said, he has a future in this business.
All right. Well, did you let the people of Franklin know in advance that you were going to do this? Because Wells got into all kinds of trouble when he ran a radio broadcast. It didn't tell him it was fake.
Yeah, well, this was not broadcast. This was done live. This was a theater presentation.
Oh, it was done. Oh, okay. I thought you did run the radio. Okay.
No, we couldn't get the rights to perform stuff on the radio, on the air.
Really?
It's just hard. It's complicated because a lot of this stuff was not copyrighted, and no one knows who owns them. But if you do it, and someone did own it, They could nail you.
So-
Not
That's maybe the easiest way to tell who owned it. So go ahead and do it, and then
Of
they'll
course.
show up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't like we would be broadcasting on a 50,000 watt station. It's just a local operation, but still, the stations were afraid to do it.
Mhm. Any last words about your book?
Well, I want to make sure people know where they can get it if they like it. It's going to be it'll be a great Christmas present for somebody that you know who's a history fan who might be kind of hard to buy for. It's not expensive. It's a pretty book and a handy book to have around. In Clarion, it's available at the Book Nook right there on Main Street, and right around the corner in the Clarion County Historical Society. Nice folks there. And the Fulmer House too carries a great selection of books by local authors, and they're carrying this book as well. You can also get it in Butler at the Putnam County Historical Society, in Warren County Historical Society, the Drakewell Museum, the Foxburg Library, the Venango County Historical Society, and the Venango Museum of Science and Industry too. So it's around. Or if you go to my Facebook page, that's Adam Midas. Adam is the first man. Midas as the king with the golden touch. Adam Midas Press, and you can buy there through PayPal or print out an order form and send it off to me. It'd be wonderful.
So own a piece of history for this Christmas.
Yeah, indeed.
Paul, thank you for joining us on Clarion Connection today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron.
I'm Ron Wilshire, and we'll see you next week.